Top of the morning, planet Earth, and to all the lovely ladies and gentlemen out there, a hearty and healthy Irish hello. You're listening to the Celtic Coach radio show, where science, spirituality, and self-discovery meet. Boy, do we have a great show for you today. And if you're listening in on the car, driving around the state, you're coming in at 92.5 FM, F for Frank, M for Matilda. Occidental California. We are streaming also on the World Wide Web at kows.fm, and studio call-in number is 755-9250. Now, boy, we have a special guest for you coming into the studio today. A man by the name of Ron Wilder is here. Now, I know there's a lot of coaches out there that are listening in, and also a lot of our regular listeners. Ron Wilder, of course, is an author, coach, black belt martial artist, so we better not mess with this guy today. He's also an explorer. He's also a very highly successful and sought-after executive coach. He works with executives, CEOs, entrepreneurs, and he also helps coaches to build their business. So for all the coaches listening out there today, turn those coaches' ears up, turn the listening up, so we can get a good info from Ron today. He studied engineering, economic systems at Stanford University. He's also studied physics at Emory University. He is also one of our guest teachers at the Art and Science of Business Building beginning in October 2nd, and all around just a wonderful, wonderful person. He lives in Apex, North Carolina with his lovely wife and 2 daughters. Hello, Ron. Are you there, sir?
I am here, Dermot. How are you?
Very well, very well. And you hear me loud and clear, Ron?
Loud and clear. Sounds great. Yeah, good to be with you.
Welcome to the show. Now, the big question on everyone's mind was, how was your trip to Alaska?
Well, Alaska was amazing. It was actually, I've traveled a lot of places, but it was one of my personal highlights, one of my favorite vacations ever.
You look pretty happy in the I checked out your Facebook page there, and you look very happy in that picture.
Yeah, I almost didn't come back. It was very tempting to just hang out there. It's just amazing, vast, beautiful. Wildlife is awesome. Saw lots of cool, wildlife and amazing hiking, and it was a spectacular trip. So I highly recommend going if you have the opportunity.
And probably a good time to because you're a I don't want to say busy because that would be assuming, but you definitely are. A successful coach, and you're out there, you're a working coach, Ron, and you're making it happen, and you're creating your own life. Do you, when you go away for holidays or vacations, Ron, do you totally switch off from all of that?
Generally, yes. So in Alaska, I was completely off the grid for 2 whole weeks. And, I have most of my clients, I have very long-term relationships with them, and, we have a natural ebb and flow, and so I just say I'll talk to you when I get back. So, I really like to unplug and not think about things and let the mind go kind of fallow and just let new ideas, germinate. So I also like to completely get away from media during that time and just
very nice.
Not so I try to not bring. Not bring in a computer or I bring real books, not, electronic devices. And it's important to do that from time to time. So.
Oh yeah. I'm a big lover of hardback books. Wherever I go, I always have a hardback book with me. Ron, would you share a little bit, just to give the listeners, we have a lot of listeners listening, there's a lot of coaches listening in fact, and I just shared earlier that you are going to be one of the guest teachers coming into the Art and Science of Business Building, going to be talking about, the art and science of creating and asking for your coaching fee. But before we get into all of that, would you mind just kind of giving us a little, because you weren't always a successful coach, and I think it's good to hear that, because I know coaches that come to me and say, well, Dermot, you've got it easy because you've got a school and you've got this and you've got that. Not always the case, though. Would you give us a bit of a snapshot of what your life was like, when you were trying to build your business and it wasn't working, and what your life is like now?
Mm-hmm. That's great. So I may start slightly before that to give a bit of context, but I started my career in Silicon Valley in the Bay Area, and I was I had a strategy and business background. I worked in high tech as a consultant, and then as I did product marketing and sales and business development and finance. I did a lot of different things for in the startup venture world. And then I noticed during that part of my career that, I would be part of consulting teams, and I would be, advising my business clients or working for my bosses in the couple of companies that I worked in. And they always wanted, personal advice. So even though I would present them with my report or my recommendation, they would often kind of say, hey, can you stick around for a minute and help me with another problem? So I found myself having a lot of one-on-one conversations. I didn't even know it was a thing called coaching at the time. But I just was kind of this advisor, counselor, coach, whatever you called it. But I was being sought out by my, clients and bosses to, give them guidance. And so then in 2002, I moved from Silicon Valley to North Carolina. And in 2003, I left a startup company that I had been working for and decided to go out and start my own consulting business. And it started as a consulting, just general sort of strategy business consulting, but it quickly evolved into coaching because again I realized that what I really enjoyed and what I loved doing and what my clients seemed to really value was these kind of these private conversations where they could kind of solve problems and figure out solutions and brainstorm and deal with challenging issues. I just had a gift that was, able to help them with that. And I, of course, then went and did some further training to develop that gift and to learn, I've done a lot of training as a coach around developing frameworks and practices and so forth. But when I started my business, I had this sort of fantasy that, hey, I'm really great at what I do. I'm a really smart guy. Had a lot of business success. I'll just, open up my coaching business and, things will be great. Well,
yes, the money will roll in.
Yeah. And it really didn't happen like that.
Yeah.
And it really didn't, because I had this, fantasy. I mean, to really be honest about it, there was a big gap between the dream and the reality. Mm.
You're not alone in that, though, Ron. I mean, a lot of myself included. I'm sure all the coaches listening were like shaking their heads, going, "Yeah, I know what he means." Yeah,
no, and I'm sure that if you're one of those coaches that are there, they're in that spot right now. Like I've been there, and I'll tell you what it was like. But there is hope, I think, if I can offer you my story. I think there was a couple of key distinctions that I had to realize. But I opened up I opened up and announced that I had this coaching consulting business, and I'm a solo entrepreneur business owner now at this point, once I make that decision. Well, no one is kind of directing me what to do with my time on a daily basis. I don't have no one's telling me to do this or that. So I'm kind of left to my own to figure out what to do. And there's a big difference of going from like an employee to being where someone tells you what to do versus self-employed, where you really have to be very highly self-directed. And so there was that change, which is even more important, I think, than actually learning how to coach. It's the coaching skill set you can learn, but the mindset shift from, an employee to an entrepreneur mindset is big. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, it requires that you take, 100% total responsibility for everything, and recognize that if something's not working, like you're the problem and the solution. But I basically floundered around for a good 6 to 8 months after I started the business, And I did during that time I was doing a coaching certificate program. I was doing a lot of training. I was making plans. I was talking to my wife about how great things were going to be. What I wasn't doing was actually engaging with people that could actually hire me. And
yeah, I know that one.
And we had this was 2004. So at that time, my daughters were 4 and 1.5. And there was a day that summer, and and Steve Chandler writes about this story in his Wealth Warrior book. There's a chapter about me in that book. But we call it my WTF moment, where, I came down and was sitting with my wife, and she just looked at me like, WTF, what are you doing? And I could see the fear and concern and worry on her face. And, it was a really challenging moment for me because, I think it scared her to see, this man in her life who she cared about deeply and she had a lot of confidence in, because she met me as at a time in my life where I'm, very successful and, enterprising. And now I'm in a place where I'm not being successful, and she doesn't know who she's dealing with now. And it was very scary for her. And she basically said, look, I see that you're talking about this. I just don't see, I just don't see the results from it. What are you actually doing? And it was a very challenging conversation for me. And I actually couldn't sleep that night. I stayed up all night. I actually spent a lot of time on job boards looking for a job at that point, because, my primary responsibility was to be, the breadwinner for my family. And, I had been living off of savings for, dipping into savings for several months. And I looked at all these jobs, and, they were all things that I had done before, but none of them were, none of them were compelling to me, and they all felt rather confining. And I just kind of sat there and thought about, okay, I know I want the freedom to work for myself and to create my own path. So what is the missing piece? There must be something that I don't, some skill or something that I don't have that if I had it would make the difference. Mm-hmm. And the answer kind of came to me, which was, I just have to I have to commit to learning how to sell my own services. And it seems like an obvious statement in retrospect, but there's a big difference between selling products or services that someone else created versus something that you've created yourself.
Mm-hmm. So true.
And, I had come from the high-tech world. I had sold, millions of dollars of software. And I had sold products to, business to business, and I knew how to sell things. I had sold consulting projects. But there's something different when you're selling something that is so intimate to you, that is coming from your own heart and soul, and, that it really is you're selling yourself. And I realized there's got to be a way to do that. That is, high integrity, and that I can do it. And, and because I know that what I'm doing brings value to people, I just don't know really how to communicate it. And I just made a decision at that point, which is I'm going to figure that out no matter what. Mm-hmm. And the very next morning, this was 2004. I went to a real physical bookstore, bought a bunch of sales books, but I just started really immersing myself in all sorts of sales training and bringing to it, how do I adapt this towards, my own unique flavor of Ron Wilder, which is what I'm really offering. And it took a lot of practice, a lot of trial and error. But, my first 6 months my first 6 months as a coach, I made zero money. I think the second 6 months of that first year, I made $30,000 because I started, talking to people and engaging them and offering them small projects and just working from there. And then, it started to kind of build, and and along the way I was, developing martial artists. So every time I would get to it was crazy, because every time I would get to a new promotion in the martial arts, my business would jump to a new level. So I would have these like plateaus, and then I would leap up. And it's been doing that ever since. So, it went from 0 to 30 to 60 to 100, and it's kind of multiplied, and it's kept growing from there into the, to what now allows me to be, a very high service. I have a very full, not busy schedule. And I have the, opportunities now to like work with a lot of amazing people in a very creative way. So.
Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Ron, for sharing that. I'm going to go back a little bit and talk a little bit about learning to sell. You talked about really learning how to sell your services. What is one or two of the mistakes, Ron, that you see? Because you coach a lot of coaches too in how to build their business. What do you see as some of the mistakes that they make when they're out there trying to sell their services? And also, will you share your definition of selling? Because it's not what we're typically, hard sell, get them in, get it done.
Right.
Share what your definition of selling is, and then some of the mistakes that you see coaches making.
Yeah, I mean, I think my definition of selling is a conversation or series of conversations that result in a mutual decision. It results in two things. It results in, one, the client's decision whether or not to make a change in their life or their business in some way, and then a mutual decision as to whether those two parties are a good fit to work together to do that.
Nice.
And so I can break that down a bit further. And then related to that, the biggest mistake that I think coaches make is this distinction between demonstrating and diagnosing. And I think, I am a coach, and I love the amazing, and I have my own coaches that I hire, and I've worked with many over the years, and coaches love that experience of the aha moment. Like there's these amazing moments of epiphany in a coaching session that are amazing, and they feel like when they happen, like you're kind of in awe of what's just happened. Your client is too, and sometimes they're laughing or crying or just. You can feel like their life is changing right before your eyes. It's the coolest thing. And coaches love that, and that's what draws us to that work. And we kind of get addicted to it like it's, candy. And so what we then try to do by selling it is just to demonstrate that to the client. And the other thing that has the other kind of dynamic of coaches is that coaches get very invest a lot of energy in getting certificates and credentials and training that they're very, very proud of. And don't get me wrong, like I have done that myself. I have done a lot of training and I've learned a lot of methodologies. And I study a lot. I mean, I put a lot of energy into mastering my craft. However, when it comes to selling, when it comes to having a conversation with a potential client, in my experience, clients are not buying the methodology and the aha moment. They don't grasp that yet from their point of awareness where they are when they're coming into the conversation. They're coming into the conversation with a challenge, with a problem, with an opportunity. They're stuck in some way. They don't know how to proceed. And they don't really know whether to make a change or whether a change is possible. They're in a point of confusion. And so when we come in and say, well, hey, I can help you, and let's have a coaching conversation and try it out. Have a trial session, or what we're then doing is we're jumping immediately into delivering that coaching, for that client. And the hope is is that if we show them how good we are by demonstrating to them that we're an amazing coach, that somehow they will then make the decision to hire us.
Right. So that's the demonstrating part you're talking about.
That is the demonstrating approach.
Okay.
And I have done that, and I did that early on in my career, and it works. It works. It does work. In my experience, though, it is kind of a lower percentage, proposition than a diagnostic approach. And I'm just telling you what works for me in my experience.
Yeah, my experience too.
Yeah, but trying to just show someone and you're kind of betting that hey, let me show you this technique or this method and how amazing it is. It's kind of like if you went to a doctor and you needed surgery and they said, well, let me show you how well I can do stitches. And they just start stitching you up rather than actually, diagnosing what really is going on and figuring out what is going to be the ultimate task to restore you to health. Right. So what I prefer and what I have studied from my mentors and I have adapted to myself is a more of a diagnostic framework based around this concept that I'm teaching a lot around now of client leadership. And so these kind of go hand in hand. Let me break that down. The diagnostic framework is that I don't want to begin doing the work until I have thoroughly diagnosed what the issue is. And just as a medical professional wouldn't begin to do, wouldn't operate on you without diagnosing what the actual underlying root cause is and getting your consent that you accept that's the plan that you're going to follow, right? A doctor, a really good doctor will say here's what's going on. Here's what I would recommend. Here's the approach. Here's what it's going to take. Does that make sense for you? And, if you agree with that, then you begin and you schedule the surgery and the tests and whatever.
Right.
And so to not really do a proper diagnosis as a coach, I think is malpractice. It's not going to, and it also runs the risk of alleviating, the symptom rather than helping the client make a decision to actually do the work to transform the underlying, problem or opportunity. Right.
Now, what are some of the questions?
Let me,
sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to ask.
Yeah, let me just complete.
What was some of the questions?
I just want
to
complete this framework real quick.
Yeah, please do. Sorry.
Yeah. So there's a lot of idea of you want to be service oriented as a coach. Well, I would argue that the highest form of service is actually to help that client clarify in that conversation what is actually real in their life, what is the truth that they need to confront. Are they really ready to make a change? And are they committed to that change? And if so, what does, making that change require? And by having that type of conversation, what I'm really helping them do is clarify their own commitment. And from that place of commitment, then deciding, okay, should we work together or not to help you, with what you're working on? And that approach, I think, whether or not they work with me or not, I think they come away from that conversation feeling like I really helped them clarify something important in their lives. And, that they now go away from that feeling like, a little bit confronted sometimes and challenged, but also inspired because they're getting to, they're not in denial about something anymore. They're actually dealing with the real thing. So.
Yeah. And that feels to me, Ron, more about, even challenging the person, whether, it may feel, hey, I felt a bit, challenging in a way, but that feels to me more serving the client than trying to give them something or trying to sell them something.
Yeah, I would agree. That's been my experience as well.
Yeah, because I mean, go ahead.
And even if they are feeling a little bit confronted, they ultimately, appreciate that.
Yeah, I love the way Michael Neal talks about coaching, loving disruption. And so that's that, where you can challenge the client. Because maybe a doctor, in your analogy, the doctor will be the same way. It's like, hey, I'm diagnosing this, but I want to let you know that some things are going to have to change here if you want to get well. For coaching, it's kind of the same way. What? Because we have listeners listening in today, Ron, who are not coaches, and a lot of coaches too. And I'm wondering, just to serve them also here today. What are some of the questions that you ask people when you're doing a diagnostic with a new client or a prospective client? What are some of the questions that you ask them to really help you to get an idea of, okay, what is going on here and how can I serve this person?
Mm-hmm. I think there's, if people who are not coaches, but you're in business and you're a leader in an organization, or you're just trying to create a positive family environment. I think you're a leader in some regard. And I think part of the questions I'm trying to ask is, what is the future you want to create versus the status quo where you are now? Like there's like a future that you desire, and there's sort of where you really are right now. And so part of it, I want to get a sense of what that is, and really clarify what the gap is between those two states. But the way I kind of talk about it is a combination of open-ended and actually closed-ended questions. And I'll tell you what a lot of sales training suggests asking a lot of open-ended questions, which is important to draw out how the client feels about certain things. But when you're doing a diagnosis, you also do need to, I think, pinpoint certain relevant facts. So you ask, a doctor says, how do you feel? And you say, well, I don't feel very well. And you say, oh, great, let's actually check your blood pressure and get a specific number, right? And so you need the combination of facts and feelings to help the client see, and you see together like the real picture of what's going on. So my opening question really is like, what is it that you want to change? The very fact that you and I are having a conversation, if you're with me as a potential client, there's some reason that you're talking to me, and it's because you want to change something. It doesn't mean that something's wrong. It means maybe there's something you want to make better. I don't know what it is, but you're not here because you want the status quo to continue as it is, right? So my first question is, what is it that you want to change? And then the person will say, well, I want to grow my business, or I want to improve communication with my teammates at work, or I want to have a better relationship with my spouse, or, I want my kids to behave. Whatever, there's something that's going on that they want to change. And I then just say, well, tell me more about that. And I like to give them the space to kind of expand upon that and describe that. The next thing I want to know then is kind of urgency, which is, well, why now? And because all of us have like any number of things that we could try to improve in our life. Like, no one has perfection. If I look around my house, there's lots of things I could do around my house to make it better. Like, I could clean out my garage, or I could, paint the porch, or I could plant flowers. But what is it that's going to kind of compel me to do something now? So my next question generally is, well, why is this important to you now? And what we're looking for is there's been some event, some change, something that has, triggered them to say, I can't really tolerate the status quo anymore. And so, if there's a challenge in the workplace around communication, and they say, hey, I need my team to communicate more effectively. Well, why? Tell me about that. Well, we don't communicate well across departments, and, it's a challenge, and I want to say, well, what's happening now that is causing you to talk to me about that? And they'll say, well, we missed the deadline, or we missed a project, or we had a huge error, or, somebody, left the company. Like, I'm looking for some, acute and urgent problem that has resulted from that. And it also could be an opportunity. It could be that, hey, we've got a big opportunity for, to grow the business, or to go do something new and exciting, but I keep getting pulled into like day-to-day minutia, and I can't, and I feel like this opportunity is slipping away. So it's not necessarily that the person is in like, and especially for coaches, because we're oriented towards positive opportunities.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
It's not that they necessarily have a pressing problem. Well, a lot of my clients are very successful people, but they're very motivated to go, create and expand and do new things. And they want to direct their energy in those areas, not in areas that are, less valuable and productive.
Yeah.
So I want to get to like what's driving that. And then from there, I want to kind of explore, okay, are you actually at a point of commitment where you want to make this change, where you're committed to making this change no matter what? I personally like to make sure that they're committed to the change with or without me, because then they're going to get a much better result. I don't want to work with someone who's not even committed to making a change at all. But if someone says, no, you know what, I'm committed to improving the communication between myself and my spouse, and if you're really committed to that, then you would go read every book, you would study, you would try all sorts of things, to improve that relationship, no matter with or without my help. And you can go find those resources on the internet or anywhere. I mean, if someone is truly committed, they can go learn a lot of things on their own. Mm-hmm. So once I'm sure they're committed to it, then, then I want to look into, okay, well, if I were to help you, how would that add value to what you're doing? And generally that's because, I'm going to help you do it, bigger, better, faster, higher quality, fewer mistakes. Like there's some, with more creativity, I'm going to help you, get past obstacles that you don't even know that are there, but I know that they're there because of my experience. So, once someone is really committed to the result, then, adding in the support of a professional coach, you can help that client really accelerate what they're trying to do. And that's where the value is. So I'm trying to, understand really what the impact of that, what is that going to bring to them? And then the other part of the diagnosis is just then getting really, really clear. What I'm always looking for is competing priorities, trade-offs, compromises, things that clients will do that will try to that will try to, they'll once part of their subconscious mind will then try to rationalize the status quo, right?
Yeah, no,
people try to they get excited about making a positive change, but once they realize they have to make a change, then they're going to go back and defend the status quo.
Yeah.
And they'll try to tell you, well, it's really not that bad, or, I can really, it would be okay if I kept things as is. They'll try to return to that feeling of things are fine.
Yes.
And I don't really allow that. I mean, I try to kind of keep them, and that's where the confrontation is. I try to tell them, wait a minute, you're telling me this isn't acceptable. Like you just told me you want to change this, but now you're telling me that it's okay. Like, I don't buy that. Like, that's just because you're afraid of something that we need to explore, or you don't see a path forward, but, your mind is going to do that to you. We all do it. And, we have to find a way to kind of I think this is a challenging thing for coaches, new coaches especially. We have to maintain and build that tension within the client, so that they see it. They have to confront their own tension. But there's such a tendency among coaches to want to relieve that tension by coming in and demonstrating and saying, oh, well, let me help you with this little thing. And in my experience, that kind of diffuses the momentum. It gives the client a retreat. And I think to really serve someone powerfully, we need to kind of hold this higher vision for them and not allow that to be compromised.
Yeah.
And when we're the person who does that for them, then we become a powerful leader to that person.
Yeah, Ron, I hear in that the demonstration part of just, and a lot of the times I even know it for myself. I'm going to take a station ID here in a second, but I know it for myself that when a new client comes to me, I think by demonstrating, this is what I'm hearing and what you're saying is, I think by demonstrating and solving the problem for them as quickly as possible, that they'll hire me, as opposed to actually taking the time and slowing things down to where you can actually have a conversation and diagnose. I really like that. We're going to take a short 30-second station ID, Ron, so stay tuned. And we're going to shift gears, Ron. I'd like to shift a little bit and talk about, it's the current subtitle of your upcoming book, The Art of Growth. And I'd love to you to share a little bit about what the book is about and why would people be interested in buying such a book? What's in it for them? So we'll be right back, Ron. Stay tuned. Stay tuned, everyone. We'll be right back with Ron Wilder. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. If you've just tuned in, you've missed half the show. But don't worry, there's still another half to go. We are here at KOWS LP 92.5 FM on the dial, Occidental, California, streaming on the World Wide Web at KOWS.FM. If you just tuned in, welcome. You're listening to the Celtic Coach radio show, where science, spirituality, and self-discovery meet. And we have a very special guest on the show today, a man by the name of Ron Wilder. He's an author, a coach. He's a black belt martial artist. He also is a highly successful and sought-after coach. He also coaches coaches and CEOs, entrepreneurs, and and coming up with a book soon called The Art of Growth. Ron, tell us a little bit about the what was the inspiration for the book?
The book is inspired by my dual passions of working with CEOs and studying and teaching jiu-jitsu. And so the book is actually called CEO Jiu-Jitsu, The Art of Growth.
Very nice. I like it.
And when I say CEO, I mean every individual that's listening to this show. Because whether you're the CEO of your own solo coaching business or your family or a small business or your career, or if you're running a global company, like I'm speaking to that part of you that is the ultimate responsible decision maker for creating your life. So that's the CEO part. Because I love, when I'm working with someone, regardless of their title, I'm viewing you as like you are the CEO of your life. You have the creative capability of creating what you want, and I'm going to help you do that. And then jiu-jitsu is, a martial art originated in Japan. It went to Brazil. It's known in the U.S. now as like Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I had a black belt in a different martial art. I switched to jiu-jitsu. I don't have a black belt in jiu-jitsu yet. I'm working on that. But nonetheless, jiu-jitsu is called the gentle art, and it is an art of, it's designed to help a smaller, weaker person defend themselves against a stronger, more aggressive opponent. So it relies on timing and leverage and strategy and technique, not brute force. And so I kind of am combining these into a concept which is really about the art of growth. So if you think about, the martial art of, of growth, if you knew how to do that, if you understood that art, you'd be very empowered to grow your business, to be a better leader, to be a, husband, father, mother, wife, partner. I mean, it's just going to empower you in many, many ways. And so, in studying martial arts in parallel with being an entrepreneur and being a coach, I just see tremendous parallels between, training and learning, that the growth process of learning the martial arts to any learning process we undertake as we learn and grow in our lives. And so there are, many kind of metaphors that I'm going to, write about in the book and show how, the experience that we have in jiu-jitsu, has really direct parallels to the challenges we're facing in our lives. And that by understanding that at a physical level, we can translate it into kind of other parts of our life. So and this kind of grew out of something I started doing a couple of years ago, which was bringing my business clients who are CEOs or entrepreneurs to my house, teaching them jiu-jitsu, and then doing a coaching session around their business.
Oh, that's good.
And we started seeing these amazing parallels where the very problem that was showing up on the mat was also showing up in their life. And I realized, wow, there's such an amazing, connection here. I want to, explore that further. So.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've heard of, people mixing consulting with coaching and mentoring with coaching. Never jiu-jitsu. That's a new one on me, Ron.
Yeah.
That is a new one. Now, what do you find, Ron, in your practice? And also, I'm sure you're writing about it in your book, but what do you find are some of the blocks or the challenges that people have with actually, because to me, change is, growth is inevitable. Change is inevitable. But what do you see as some of the blocks or challenges that have people push against growing, that don't want to? They say they want to grow, but when it's happening, it's like, oh my God, why is this happening to me? Why did they do that? Why, what do you see in your practice and in your book?
Yeah, the one of the main frameworks that I use in the book is, jiu-jitsu teaches you to go from reactive to responsive to creative, and that is a path of self-mastery. And so, let me give you the jiu-jitsu metaphor, and then I'll apply it to a real life situation. Mm-hmm. When you're training to learn how to defend yourself against an attacker on the street, someone knocks you down, they get on top of you, they start punching you in the face. That's a very, very scary situation. If you've never trained for that situation before, you are going to react. I mean, your subconscious is going to take over, and you are going to react, and you're going to react from whatever pre-existing knowledge that you have, okay? And so maybe your reaction might be very, very passive. You might curl up in a ball and hide and just pray that it's over, right? You also may react very aggressively. You might do whatever you can to push and scratch and kick your way out of it. Well, you might try to roll over onto your knees and try to get up. There's all sorts of things you might try to do. And you might try something that you heard about on TV, you might try to punch them in the eye or something. Well, all of those approaches might work some percentage of the time. They also might not work. And even if they do work, they have a physical and energetic cost associated with them, right? So even if you're able to push the person off of you, right, but you just burned a lot of energy making that happen, and maybe you actually injured them as you were doing it. Or if you passively curl up, you just get taken advantage of, and you are really the victim in that situation. So when I teach a new student in jiu-jitsu, we show them, hey, look, here's the situation. Here's what some of the reactions commonly are if you don't know what to do. Now let me show you an alternative response, which is a technique that is based on timing and leverage and strategy. And all of a sudden, that instead of reacting to that situation, you're responding to that situation. Well, the parallel, so that's the jiu-jitsu framework. And once you've learned a technique, then you can practice that and get better at it and better at it. And soon, anytime you find yourself in that situation, then you now have another choice about how to respond, right? Well, let's apply that to a leadership situation in a business meeting. You're in a meeting and, you're trying to present, an idea, and a colleague starts making critical comments towards you, right? They may even be bullying you in front of the room full of people, right? That's a high stress, uncomfortable situation where like an attacking energy is coming at you, right? So what are you going to do in that situation? If you've never really trained for it, so to speak, you're likely going to react. Well, where are you reacting from? You're reacting from your subconscious personality. And there's a great book I'm reading now. I would recommend it to everyone, called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza. But, one definition of the personality, it's kind of like all of our embedded kind of, ways of behaving that we developed over time, figuring out how to survive in our environment, right? And so, depending on like how you were criticized at home as a kid or in school or whatever your experience was, you're likely going to react in that similar way. Like if you learned as a child to react to criticism by like sulking, you might go sulk. If you learn to react by being a comedian, you might try to make a joke. If you learn to react by responding very aggressively, now you have a big fight. But the point here is most people are reacting and they don't even know that they're reacting.
Right, yeah. Very true.
And what we want to do is to begin to observe how are we reacting to things that are in our life, and just to notice, wow, I'm reacting. I'm technically not even choosing what I'm doing because it's all happening so fast coming out of my subconscious, right? And the metaphor of jujitsu says, well, wait a minute, I can learn a different response to this situation. And I can practice that, and I can learn a different way so that I don't have to react. I can choose a different response. Well, now the challenge becomes I need to learn what that response is. And because it's something new to me, I don't really have a pre-existing role model for what to do. So if my reactive behavior was to respond, aggressively, I don't really know I need to stop reacting aggressively, but I also need to learn a different response that is effective. But I've never learned that before because I've spent my whole life up until then has been to react in a particular way. So I actually need to learn some new skill at that point. And then I need to practice that skill until it becomes like embodied in a new way of operating for me. And jiu-jitsu is kind of like that. You react to something, you get put into a situation, you react, you start to learn a new technique. And then there's a period of integration, which is very important, where as you're practicing, you learn over and over that whenever that situation comes up, instead of reacting, I need to switch to the response. And over time, that response becomes better and better and smoother until it's kind of now a part of who you are. And so, jiu-jitsu provides this map of growth, of how we can grow. And beyond responsive is once you learn a lot of ways to respond, you can become very, very creative. And so instead of waiting for things to react to, you can actually go create things to your advantage. Well, that is what, if you're a leader, if you can, and this show is about, self-development and self-discovery, when you commit to the path of self-development, you're really on that path of going from reactive to responsive to creative. I want to let go of my reactive patterns. I want to learn how to make new choices. And the more new choices I have available to me, the more of a creative person I can become. And that's where the art comes in because, it's interesting how we call them martial arts, not martial sciences. They're all based on principles of physiology and physics, but we call them arts. Well, why? Because at the highest levels of the martial arts, they're very creative and self-expressive, and people come up with all sorts of inventive ways to do things. So I think that's what life is all about. Like as we become our highest selves, we're really letting go of that old personality, that old conditioned self, and we're growing into, who we really can become. So that's the metaphor I like, and jiu-jitsu is a fun thing to kind of give ourselves a physical experience of that, and then apply that to real life situations, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I like that, Ron. And I never get tired of hearing, Ron, the difference between when I'm in reaction and when I'm in responsive or in creation mode. And I often think about that for coaches too that are out there listening. Like I go through training, you've gone through training, coaches out there have gone through a lot of training. And then we get to the coaching, the actual coaching clients. And we forget that there's more practice that needs to be done. Practicing how to, which I know you're going to talk about in the school. November 6th, you're going to be talking about in the Art and Science of Business Building, coaching fee, how to practice and ask for that. And I think coaches, we forget that there's things that we still have to practice while we're coaching people. Because if we have to be still growing and we want the clients are there for us to support them in growing. But I think we missed that piece, and I really enjoyed you talking about that, because that part of the practice, I mean, we call it a coaching practice. And I think there's a reason for that, yeah, it's a coaching business. But there's also, I don't think the practice ever ends.
Yeah, I don't think it is. I mean, if you're really on the path to mastery, it doesn't ever end. There's always like infinite opportunities to explore.
Yeah.
And asking for money is a great example, because it's an area where every person on the planet that has a story about money that they learned as a kid. I mean, they learned certain beliefs about what money is, what it represents, how much of it they believe they can have, everybody has a story, some internal definition about money. And if you're going to be a coach asking for fees, that has to be resolved. You have to come to terms with what that is for you. And in my experience, change it to a more empowering, view of what money is. And that because then if you don't do that, you will either reactively, and by the way, reaction is not always things we're doing. It's sometimes things we're not doing. So a reactive pattern can be to avoid conversations around money. Like
yes.
If you have a big money story, you'll have conversations with clients, and they'll sound amazing, and you'll have these wonderful ahas, and you'll show them all these things, and you'll avoid the actual critical moment of truth question, which is, here's my feed. Would you like to work with me?
Yeah, a lot of heads shaking right now, Ron.
Yeah. So,
will you talk a little bit about that, Ron? Just because, I mean, now don't give away all the stuff, because I know you're going to come in and talk about it in the program. But would you share a few little nuggets around like helping coaches? Because one of the things that I've heard you talk about, and it really helped me in my practice, was practicing your fee. Now, I never heard about that until I heard you talk about it. You did a talk with Steve Chandler, how to have client conversations, and you talked about in there practicing your fee, which was very new to me. So, would you mind just talking about that for a few minutes?
Sure. Well, this is a technique. I first learned this from Steve, actually, which is, you practice your fee like it's your telephone number, right? And, if someone asks you your telephone number, you just tell them it's, whatever it is, right? You can recite that number with no real problem at all. It's just a piece of information, right? And however, when we talk about money, there is there's an attachment, there's a meaning that is attached to that number in our mind, body, subconscious system, right? And so when you practice it, it's very important. My experience with jiu-jitsu and other things is that the body tells you where your resistance or blocks are. And I wrote a book about this a couple of years ago called "Clear Your Hidden Profit Blockers," where I talk about this. But if you're practicing your fee, you'll feel, where the resistance comes up in your body. And there's a pathway then to identify the old story or belief that you have about money. And you can then examine, is that true or not for you now? Right. And so, for example, if you have a belief that I had a client several years ago who was an entrepreneur trying to start a business, was struggling in sales because she would present the product but would not ask for money, right? Mm-hmm. And when we finally explored that, we got to a core question of, what was your family belief about rich people? And it was those people. It was like there was a kind of derogatory tone to, it's those people that live in the fancy part of town because we were poor. So, and who said it was those people? Oh, my mom always talked about those people. So if you were to successfully sell your product and become successful as a business person and become quote unquote rich, which is something you're saying that you want to do, you might actually become one of those people, right? Which would mean what? That your mom wouldn't love you, right? So there's like a deep internal conflict going on around money that needs to be resolved. And now you have to look at that and say, well, is that really true? Like, would your mom really want that for you or no? And even if she did, would you care about that at this point in your life, now that you're an adult who is free to make your own choices, right? Because when you're a kid, you have to stay attached to your parents generally so that you can survive. But now that you're an adult, those things that bind you to them, don't have to be operating in your life anymore. Mm-hmm. So those are some examples about, to me, it's practicing your fee. Yes. Like, what do you say that your fee is? There's a whole other piece about how do you actually present it to the client in their world, in their terms. And we'll talk about that with your program. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a different, there's the internal part, which is being clear about your feelings around money. There's the external part, which is the skill of presenting the fee to the client in terms that actually make sense for them, not for you, right? And what I mean by that, just briefly, is when you're a coach and you say, my fee is, just as an example, like my fee is $10,000 for 6 months of coaching. Like in my opinion, that is a very ineffective way to present your fee, because the client is saying in their mind, what does 6 months have to do with anything other than it's convenient for you as the coach, right? It's much more powerful to present it as, in order to get the outcomes that you want, it's going to require this type of work process together. That's going to take about 6 months. I'm going to help you accomplish that, and my fee for that is $10,000 or whatever your fee is. So in other words, there's a way of presenting the fee in a way that is very relevant to what the client's outcomes are, not what fits your personal business model. Yeah.
And I hear also the diagnosis in there again, Ron. Like actually, one of the things that I've heard you talk about is, just what you said just there is saying, okay, what is it you need? We work together, we talk about it, and then you diagnose and say, okay, this is what it's going to take. We're going to need to work together for 6 months. We're going to need to do X, Y, and Z, and this is what it's going to cost. And that sounds, again, diagnosis as opposed to, oh my gosh, how much can I get from this person,
Right. Yeah. Once you've done the diagnosis, you present the fee in context of the diagnosis. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, totally different way of doing things. Yeah. And when the client hears that, it makes sense to them. They have confidence in it. Yeah. That, if you went to a surgeon and you say, how much does it cost for surgery? And they say, it's $10,000 for 6 hours of surgery. You're laughing, right? It's absurd. Yeah. What would you rather say? You would rather the surgeon say, well, this operation usually takes 2 hours. I booked the operating room for 4 hours, and just in case there's any complications, my goal is to have you, back in the recovery room as soon as possible, but I need enough time to make sure we do everything correctly. Are you good with that? And after the surgery, there's going to be 6 months of like physical therapy. So the whole program is this. Are you ready to make that decision? Like I've presented it now in terms that increase your confidence that I actually am going to be an effective leader to you to get this outcome.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's wonderful. Wonderful. Ron, take everything, no pressure, but take everything that we talked about today, and I'm going to ask you about your book in just a moment, where we can pick it up and when it's coming out. But take everything that we talked about today for the coaches and for also our regular listeners, and what is it what do you want the listeners walking away with from our conversation today?
Well, I think for coaches and for listeners, I think clients are not actually looking for coaches. They're secretly looking for leadership. They don't know how to articulate that, but that's really what they want. Mm-hmm. They crave someone who is strong enough to lead them to create the life that they really want, and who can help them overcome whatever challenges they have, internal or external. Yeah, and coaching is a profession and is a set of skills that we use to facilitate that. But really, at a higher level, we can think of ourselves as leaders in that process in a collaborative way with our clients. It's much more of an empowering stance to come from. So if you're the coaches that I mentor, I'm really challenging them and helping them to view themselves, the work they do, as leadership, and coaching is a kind of tool set that facilitates that. But and it's coming from the idea that, I coach CEOs, but when I'm with them, I am a leader to them in that particular context. And when I take on that as like a sacred responsibility, and I really take that seriously, it just produces better results for all around. Like it challenges me to grow, and it really helps them, get what they want. So that would be kind of my parting word is to view yourself in, whoever you are as how do I provide leadership to the people that I'm serving in the most effective way, and to be committed to that path of growth as a leader.
Nicely said. Nicely said, Ron. Now, you mentioned one book that you've already written, Clear Your Hidden Profit Blockers. When is your new book coming out, Ron?
Well, I actually just hired I just hired a coach. I actually re-engaged with Steve Chandler to help me write it.
Smart move.
He helped me with a couple of my previous books. But yeah, so I have a lot of the material down. I'm going to start getting it all written up probably by the end of the year. So I'll look to release it like early 2020 probably. Yeah,
well, feel free to, when you have a chapter or so, feel free to send it to me, and I'll put it up on the Business Building Facebook page, and people
Perfect.
Can
I'd be happy to do that.
Have a reading at it. In any other information, Ron, if people have really enjoyed what they were listening to today and wanted to reach out and connect to you, how might they do that?
Email me, ron@alignedaction.com. You can, drop me a note. I'm curious, I'm a teacher. I view myself as a coach, teacher. So I'm always curious, like, what did you take away from what we talked about? What did you learn? If I can help you, I'll do my best to help you. And, if you just, I like to talk to people and see what's going on. So.
Very cool. Ron, thank you very much. I know
thank you, Dermot.
You're helping a lot of people out there, and I really appreciate that you would take the time to talk to us. And I look forward to having you in the upcoming Art and Science of Business Building. Until then, Ron, wishing you all the best, and thanks again for coming by.
Thank you. Take care.
All the best, Ron. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to play some more music. Before we do, just to let you know, the upcoming Coaches Cafe is coming up on September 18th, 2019. We're going to be talking about your social self versus your professional self. You can email me at dermot@ericsson.edu to talk to me, and I'm happy to send you out some content from our show. And if you'd like to get a copy of the show today, please feel free to email me at dermot@ericsson.edu. ERICKSON, dermot@ericsson.edu, and I will send you out a copy. If you're listening live or if you're listening on SoundCloud or one of those things, feel free to give me a buzz. I'll send you out some information about the art and science of business building. It is for Ericsson coaches only, though. And also, if you want an actual copy of this show, an MP3, email me, dermot@ericsson.edu, and I'll send that out to you. All right, that's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Really enjoyed having Ron on the show today, and feel free to reach out to him. And we're going to keep the ball going here with a few more songs. But before that, we're going to play our happy-go-lucky Irish music. Always a crowd pleaser. All right, stay tuned, and thank you very much to all the coaches and to all the listeners for checking in on the show today. Much, much appreciated. Until the next time, think big, have fun, and stay curious. I'm the Celtic Coach, and that, my dear friends, is No Blarney. Cheers, everyone.